Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Orbit Football Podcast. We're sorry Tyler's been a little under the weather this week, so we had to switch up a bit of our recording and release schedule, but we're back at it. We're ready to get right into Week 4 today, and before we really get into Week 4, we'd like to recap just a tad of Week 3, more so of doing our new top 25s. Both of us, even though Tyler, as mentioned, has been a bit under the weather, we've got our new top 25s ready to go, and I guess, Tyler, I'll turn it over to you. Who are we picking 25 through 21? We'll start just the way we've gone for our top 25s.
Entering my top 25, I have Syracuse at 25. I think they've been playing good football lately. They haven't been playing the best of programs. They got a win over Purdue this weekend, but they look pretty good in doing it. So I have them sliding in at 25. Tennessee going to fall a little bit, 24. Took a brutal loss to Florida at the Swamp, but still, they were favored by not quite a bit, but about a touchdown, and they got stomped basically. UCLA at 23. I think they've been playing good football. UCF at 22. Then I have Duke at 21.
All right, I'll first go over the three teams that I've got out of my poll. The first team I got in my poll that was 25th is Wisconsin. They've dropped out. The team that I had at 24th was Kansas. They drop out. And I do have Tennessee dropping out of my top 25 from 18 fully out as it stands right now. So to go 25 through 21. 25, I have the UCF Golden Knights. At 24, I have the Iowa Hawkeyes. 23, the UCLA Bruins. I agree with you there. 22, the North Carolina Tar Heels. And 21, the Washington State Cougars.
At 20, I have a new addition to my poll, Missouri. I think they played a really good game against Kansas State. I mean, Kansas State did not really, they didn't even play bad. If I had one thing to say about them, their pass defense might have just been a little bit flimsy. But, I mean, I think they played a great game, too, and I think Mizzou just took them down. So, Mizzou slides into 20. I have Ole Miss at 19, Miami at 18, Kansas State at 17. Still going to be ahead of Mizzou just based off, I think Kansas State would win at a neutral site. So I have them a little bit more favored than Mizzou, and then I have Utah at 16.
All right, now I'll go to mine here. And at 20, I have Texas A&M. I still have the Aggies in my top 25 as it stands. 19, the Duke Blue Devils. I believe they moved up a spot, or maybe stayed the same. Actually, no, both them and Texas A&M did move up a spot with Tennessee dropping out. But at 18, dropping down is Kansas State for me. I still have them in my top 25. I still, as you mentioned, I still think that they're a solid program. Obviously, the last second 61-yard field goal, the longest in SEC history from Missouri, kind of does that to you. But it was a back-and-forth game. Missouri, as you mentioned, though, kind of had the upper hand for the majority of the game. But that's not a slide against Kansas State. At 17, I have Miami. And at 16, I have Utah.
At 15, I have Oregon. I'm starting to pull them up a little bit. I've been liking what they've seen, and it's going to be the last time we're talking about Oregon today, so I'm going to be breaking down that Colorado game, which should be fun. North Carolina at 14. I have Alabama at 13 after a brutal week last week against USF. They still did win, but not liking what I'm seeing from the Crimson Tide. Oregon State I have at 12, and I have LSU at 11, excuse me.
At 15, keeping there, I have Alabama. As you mentioned, a very ugly win in Tampa against South Florida with the weather delay and everything that happened in that game. But I had them at 15 the week before. I keep them at 15, but moving up ahead of them this week at 14 is Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss at 14. At 13, I have Oregon State at 12. Dropping down just a hair is Notre Dame at 11, though. Moving up once again in my poll, a team that I fluctuated a bit here in the top 25 the first couple weeks, but it's Oklahoma that sits at 11 right now for me.
10, I have Washington. They've been playing really good football, and honestly, I kind of want to, I slipped them down last week, and I think it's just because of neutral site, but I mean, what they've been doing recently has been extremely impressive. So at 10, we have Washington. At 9, I have Oklahoma. 8, I have Notre Dame. And Texas and USC are going to be 7 and 6 for me.
At 10 for me, staying the same as Texas. Most of really my top 10, I will give some foreshadowing here. Most of my top 10 mostly stays the same. The only ones I kind of switch around I'll get to. But at 10, I still have Texas. 9, I still have Oregon. 8, flipping with LSU. This week, 8, I have Washington. 7, I have LSU. And 6 still for me is Ohio State, the Buckeyes.
Speaking of Ohio State at year 6, I have them at my 5. I think they've been playing really good football the last 2 weeks. They got out of conference play after that game against Indiana, and they've looked like a really complete team. So I think they are going to be a top 5 team for me at 5. I have Michigan at 4, Penn State at 3. Georgia beat South Carolina last week. I have them at 2, and even after a very lackluster win against Boston College, I have Florida State staying at my top spot.
So my top 5 for me, switching here. I keep switching these two teams because I think they're very evenly matched teams and very similar football teams. But at 5, I have Penn State. At 4, I have USC. At 3, I have Florida State. At 2, I have Georgia. And still my number 1 spot sits the Michigan Wolverines. So that wraps up our top 25s there as we get into our little bit of our show today. As we mentioned, didn't really get to recap week 3. There were some crazy games that happened. As you already mentioned, Florida State skids by with a victory over Boston College. As I mentioned, Missouri with the last-second field goal. Some heroics there. Obviously, we'll get into a little bit later, talking a little bit about Colorado and more in depth about Alabama as we see it, maybe even some other teams that are on our list. But let's waste no time and let's just get right into it and talk about some of the games this week. We have a loaded schedule this week, folks. Week 4, it's finally here. Probably the most loaded college football week that we might have the entire season. You've got out-of-conference games. You've got conference games. You've got some battles that will be taking place this week. So let's waste no time, jump right into it. I will say after last week, though, we only predicted 8 games. We're going to go back to try to get the even 0 in the games that we predict this year. So we're going to go 12, add 12 games to this loaded schedule this week. So starting off our 12 games is the team that sits at your number 1 spot, Tyler, and that's the Florida State Seminoles. They're traveling to one of the Death Valleys, probably the lower of the two, but one of the Death Valleys, and Clemson taking on the Tigers there. Florida State 2.5-point favorites on the road. Had a scare last week against Boston College on the road. Yes, it was the red bandana game, but what are we thinking for this? I know you're not very high on this Clemson team. I'm not very high on this Clemson team either, but 2.5 is that really, that's almost a pick 'em there. Do we think that this game is a toss-up?
I think this game could be close in the sense of the score never breaks apart, but I think Florida State is just going to be out in front. Well, maybe not out in front, but I think they're going to be definitely the better team when it comes down to it. This is going to be a pretty good defensive matchup for Clemson, I think, because they've really locked in the last few weeks, and I think Florida State, especially coming off of a matchup where they were probably just looking ahead, in all honesty. Boston College, they have been horrible through the first 3 weeks of the season, and it's kind of funny because, as I say, Boston College has been horrible. I've tuned into every single Boston College game this year just because of it is the Sickos committee. They're a big fan of Boston College, and that's what I'll leave it at. But I think this is going to be a good matchup for Clemson. It's going to be at home too. So I think this game could be a close game, but I do think Florida State is going to end up winning this game. The biggest thing is Clemson going to be able to get pass rush on Florida State. That is going to be really the driving factor, because if they get pass rush, they can definitely go out and win this game. But also, we've seen what Clemson looked like against a Duke team. It was week 1, it was on the road, but they looked horrible, and they've locked in ever since, but they've played, the likes of Charleston Southern, and the Florida State is a little bit different than Charleston Southern. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Florida State to win this game. I have them winning 31-20. I think that Clemson offensively is not going to be able to get things going, because when you think about what worked against Florida State last week, it was the QB run. And Clemson's, they're not going to employ Klubnik through a QB run system. They're going to have to pass the ball on Florida State. Florida State's secondary, I think, is going to be way too overmatched for the receivers and just the overall targets for this Clemson team. Klubnik and Will Shipley, they're going to have big games, but I think it's not going to be enough. I'm going to go ahead and pick Florida State to win 31-20, and they're going to cover. Yeah,
I like that score. I really do. I really like that score. I actually have a very similar score of my own for this ball game and very similar sentiments. As you mentioned, it might have been a case of Florida State possibly just looking ahead. this week to facing Clemson. Obviously, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since the Seminoles have been this high in the college football world and high enough to where they're the dog that's looking to be ahead of Clemson. It's likely been since the days of even I'd want to say Dalvin Cook in that era with DeAndre Francois. It's been that long, and even then Clemson was top dog. It's more so you'd have to go back to Jameis Winston there with the Seminoles, the Jimbo Fisher days. But I agree with you. I think that Florida State they're just a better football team overall than Clemson. I get that Clemson's faced 2 cupcakes since that Duke loss, and they've looked fine. I mean, they looked fine against FAU, but Casey Thompson did go down with I believe it was a torn ACL in that ball game for the Owls, so he's out for the season. And then the week before, they struggled in the first quarter, really, with Charleston Southern. It was a very sloppy first quarter. Obviously, they hung, I believe, 66 on them to end that ball game. But, I think that Florida State is still one of the top 5 teams in the country. I think that they're going to really remain one of the top 5 teams in the country for a majority of the season. Obviously, that schedule does not get very difficult after this game. When you're looking at Florida State's schedule moving forward and some of the tougher games that they're going to play, they do have to play Duke, but that game's at home. And they got to play Miami. That game's also at home. Granted, at the end of the season, they do face Florida at home, or on the road, correction, but still, most of their bigger conference games are at home. This is really their biggest test on the road in conference play. And as mentioned, you got to take down top dog, but I think they do it. I think Florida State, I think Jordan Travis is – a lot of people aren't really talking about this kid as being a Heisman, really a guy that has his name in the Heisman, which I don't understand why. Jordan Travis, in my opinion, is playing like one of the top 5 players in college football right now. For me personally, I think it's Caleb Williams, obviously. Caleb Williams is there. Michael Penix Jr. is obviously in my list. Jordan Travis is up there. I might even throw Quinn Ewers' name into the ring there, possibly as my 5. And then, a couple other debates can go on there of who else could be a top 5 player in the country, more so quarterback in the country. But I think that Jordan Travis is playing very solid. I think Florida State's a better team than Clemson. Like I said, I liked your score of 31-20. I'm going to duck it down just a little bit. I'm going to go 31-16. I still think Florida State wins. I think they win pretty handily. It's just I don't think Clemson has enough offensively or defensively really to just kind of keep it close. I agree with you where it's just I think Florida State's going to maintain control in this ball game, and they're going to ride with a victory and ride out of Death Valley, still undefeated 4-0 in the season, defeating Clemson and looking like the front runners in the ACC for the remainder of the year. But speaking of the southeastern area of the country, we'll go to the Southeastern Conference, which has faced a little bit of questions this year, I will say. Some out-of-conference struggles for the SEC this year, not really looking the best. Arguably, their best out-of-conference win came with Missouri over Kansas State this year. But 2 teams in the SEC West are squaring off this weekend. And no, it's not the one that you're really thinking about right now, but we'll talk about this one first. And it's between Auburn and Texas A&M. Both of these teams finished at the bottom of the SEC West last year. Obviously didn't have the season that they wanted to, but do we think one of these teams can come out of this ballgame at Kyle Field and really cement themselves as possibly a player in the SEC West this year?
So I'm actually kind of torn on this game just because of how it matches up. So if we're looking at Auburn versus A&M, Auburn's going to be very one-sided. They have not been able to run the ball. Their EPA per pass is 63rd in the country for Auburn. And A&M, defensively, their EPA per pass is 124th in the country. So that is going to be one big matchup, and you ask yourself, like, does this translate as the Miami game? Because we all knew that Miami threw the ball whenever they wanted on A&M. You also got to think A&M probably game planned for the run because Miami is going to be one of the best rushing teams in the country. And I don't think Auburn offers that threat that A&M is going to be looking at. So I think Auburn, I like them probably more than this A&M team. Looking down, the road of how they're going to progress. But I think A&M, especially being at home, I think this is going to be a game where they're going to be able to take a I just don't think Auburn is going to be able to be two-faced enough to be able to pull it off. I do think this is probably going to be I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I think that Connor Wegman is going to be able to lead the offense pretty well. I think that A&M is going to end up winning this game. I have it at 21-18, which is kind of a lower scoring game, but I just don't think there's going to be much offense in this game, just with how they match up against each other. So yeah, I'm gonna go pick 21-18 A&M. This is gonna be a big game for both coaches. Obviously, Jimbo Fisher, coming into the season on the hot seat, and lost against Miami. If he loses against Auburn at home, we could potentially. I mean, that could be his last game as coach, depending on if it gets ugly or not. But we're talking about an A&M program that is recruited out of the wazoo, and nothing has been able to happen with that program. So, and then obviously if Auburn can get a win, it kind of kicks off the Hugh Freeze era, and it gets them going really good, and they'll be able to roll into further conference play with a lot of momentum on that side. So, sneaky good game with how big this slate is. It's a really important game for both programs.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this can propel one team, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, propel one team to be a player. Don't know if they could be top dog, but at least a player in the SEC West this year. Auburn, obviously a couple weeks ago, went on the road, played against Cal. Didn't look the greatest, but walked out with a victory nonetheless, and that's really what matters, is that they got the victory. They beat Cal, probably the worst team in – either the worst or the second worst team in the Pac-12. It's really them and Stanford who are just bottom of the barrel in that conference. But, I mean, Texas A&M, you do have a point where you said the Texas A&M probably game planned a bit more for the run against Miami, and then Tyler Van Dyke just shocked the country and came out and threw for what he did in that ball game, which was immaculate, which kind of showed the talent that both teams had. That was a game that could really change the direction of either program, and as you mentioned, this game can also change the direction of possibly programs and possibly coaches' lives right now. You mentioned Jimbo's on the hot seat, and if you lose in front of your home crowd, as you said, in front of the 12s, in front of Kyle Field to Auburn, that could be it, man. Like, you could be done after recruiting, having two of the best recruiting classes, likely maybe in college football history the past 2 years, and not doing anything with it. I understand that talent's still young, but you got to do something with that. And that's where I do think Texas A&M gets the victory. And I do think it's a little lower scoring. I don't think it's as low scoring as you say it is. I think we're going to see a little bit more offense from both teams, but I still think it's going to be a 1-point score. And by a technical sense, I do think that Auburn does cover in this ballgame. I'm going to go 27-21. Give me the Aggies in this one. And Jimbo Fisher stays alive, keeps his really career at Texas A&M alive after this, and maybe the Aggies can keep things rolling and look forward to that matchup against the Crimson Tide heading into October whenever that comes around. But we talked about the Pac-12 a little bit there, the bottom of the barrel teams, and now let's talk about a team that both you and I had finishing second to last in the preseason, who has come out and started 3-0. And that's the Buffaloes of Colorado. Obviously the most talked about team in the country, very hyped team. The media is all over them this year. Deion Sanders, what else needs to be said about this team that has not been said? But they have their first test this week, their first real test. And the way that the money line has it, it looks like Colorado's not going to be up for this test against the Oregon Ducks, traveling to a very hostile environment in Autzen. Oregon, I'm very high on this team this year. You're not as high on this team, but you're starting to buy in a little bit more on really what the Ducks can be. But Colorado, do we think, are we going to doubt Deion here? Do we think that the Buffaloes have a shot to walk in and upset the Ducks?
This is kind of an interesting game because we, ever since week, their first week of action against TCU, we've been on the train that we know that Colorado just cannot run the football, and it's actually funny because they're facing the worst run defense probably in the Pac-12 statistically up to now. if you look at Pac-12 yards before contact per attempt allowed, Oregon's actually dead last in the entire conference. They are behind. Colorado and Oregon are the worst two teams. Like they are the bottom of the barrel of Pac-12. Colorado allows 2.9 yards per contact, and Oregon allows 3.625 yards per contact or per attempt allowed. And this is a game where I'm looking at, like, will Colorado be able to run the ball successfully? They're going to be without Travis Hunter, which is a big thing for them, offensive and defensively. It's going to be interesting to see how this game plays out. I think Oregon is going to win this game. I think this Oregon team they're good. I was a little bit low on this team. They're a good team, and obviously we were low on Colorado, and they're a lot better than what we expected. But I think what you've seen from that Colorado State team, what they were able to do with them, they drove the ball pretty well, and they dominated like 3/4 of that game. And it really, like, they could have won that game if they did not get so conservative at the end. Because I really do think that Norvell and staff, they let that game slip away, and I think they know it. This is going to be a big bounce back game for Colorado. There's going to be a ton of media attention. They deal with media attention ever since Colorado's been there, and they've handled it well. They came out and played 2 really good games against Nebraska and TCU, and they slipped up against Colorado State. Rivalry game started at 10 o'clock on the East Coast, but I just think Oregon's going to be way too good for this team. They are going to be able to pass the ball, and if they keep Colorado on the field for the majority of this game, I think this game could get really ugly. Honestly, it's going to be Colorado's. I guess I wouldn't say it's their first big road test, because obviously the TCU game was that big first road test, but we know what Colorado looks like now, and we know what Oregon looks like now, and this is going to be like we know what to expect from these teams, and I don't think Colorado's going to be able to hang with them. I actually do have Colorado covering. I have them covering. I have them losing 40-20. They cover by a single point. I think Oregon gets it done. I don't know. This game is going to be really interesting. My biggest takeaway is the jerseys that are going to be on field are going to be pretty immaculate.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. Oregon with the ball game, for those of you that hadn't seen, they're going, I believe, with the charcoal helmets and the charcoal pants and the style green jerseys that they usually wear. And I even looked at the cleats. It looks like they're going with almost a chameleon style color on the laces. It's going to look sharp, but don't get me wrong, Oregon always looks sharp with that Phil Knight money that's pumping in there from Nike. But this game, I would have liked your score if Travis Hunter's playing in this game. That's another big thing. Travis Hunter is out for 3 weeks after that lacerated, I believe it was liver is what he had after that huge hit he took in that Colorado State game. But as you mentioned, Colorado, they've allowed a lot of offense. They have. TCU, a team that personally I don't think is the greatest offensive team. They have some talent there, don't get me wrong, but they allowed 42 points in that ball game. Colorado
just
State
last week as well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Colorado State in that ball game, although it did go to multiple overtimes, it was still, they allowed 37 points. And they were getting beat for a majority of that ball game. How are you going to do that against a team that's a top 25, maybe not even top 20, but maybe top 15 team in the country in Oregon? Both you and I do think Oregon is a top 15 team in the country, and so do a lot of people. Oregon's a good club. Don't get me wrong. This team is good. And I've been high on Oregon. I've been high on Oregon a lot this year. I think the Ducks are a very solid program, and I think we're going to see some fireworks in this football game. I think that we're going to see passing numbers from both Bo Nix and Shedeur Sanders that are going to be otherworldly in this ball game, and it's partially going to be because of their talent and the talent that happens on offense. But the other part of it, I think, could be because of just the lack of defense that could be in this ball game. I mean, both these guys have put themselves, up there. They've been in the national limelight this year. Obviously, the Bo Nix Heisman campaign has been going around a lot in the preseason for Oregon. But I like this team. I do like Oregon, but I think we're going to see some fireworks. I think that this game is going to be entertaining, and not in the sense that it's going to be a close game. In the sense that you're going to see a lot of touchdowns scored in this ball game. So much, in fact, that I think Oregon cracks the 60-point mark in this ball game. And I feel like we're seeing a lot of offense in this game. It gives me those vibes. Travis Hunter's out for Colorado. That's a big issue for them. But, unless they maybe switch up the game plan and could go and lean heavier on that run, I just don't. I don't see a way that they win this football game unless they force a couple turnovers from Oregon, which, Bo Nix can do, but I don't think he's going to do it this Saturday. I'm going to go Oregon 66-31. I'm going Ducks big, dropping a 60-plus bomb on the Colorado defense and taking the victory and really quelling the hype around the Buffaloes in this early season. But we'll stick in the Pac-12 now with another Pac-12 matchup in that 3:30 slate. This one is a little interesting as well. A closer spread, a closer game. Two teams ranked in the top 25. Two teams we both have in the top 25, although both in the the bottom half of our top 25. But UCLA travels to Rice-Eccles to take on the Utah Utes. Big question in this game. Cam Rising right now, game time decision. Hasn't been on the field yet this year. Bruins are starting to find a bit of momentum. Can they walk into Rice-Eccles and take a victory over the reigning back-to-back Pac-12 champions?
I think this game's going to be interesting to watch, especially we're going to have to keep up with Cam Rising and see if he's going to play. For my end, I'm going to predict that he's not going to be playing. I just don't think... Sounds like he's just not on track yet. They have been pushing it back, and they even pushed it back today and said that he's going to be basically a game-time decision. And I just don't like when programs do that, especially when they were talking about last week how he might have been able to get cleared before their game last week, and obviously he was never going to play that game, but they were talking about he could get cleared, and now it's getting pushed back to he's still going to be a game-time decision. I don't think Cam Rising is going to be in this game, personally. And when you look at another, a stat that I used on the last game, yards before contact per attempt allowed, UCLA is fourth in the nation at the least amount of yards per contact or before contact per attempt, and that is nationally elite. I think that if you're going to be able to get Utah to have to be one-sided and throw the ball with either Bryson Barnes or his name is slipping me, but the quarterback that came in and basically won the game against Baylor.
Nate Johnson,
yes,
right?
Nate Johnson.
Yep.
I think if you're going to have to make them throw the ball on you, I don't think it's going to be... I don't think that's a path for success for a team like Utah. And I have Utah ahead of UCLA in my rankings, and the game is being played at Utah. But I like UCLA in this game just based off the situations around it. If Cam Rising was playing and he played, a game or two before this, even if he does play, I mean, he's going to have to come in and his first start play a really good defense, and he's going to have to win. He's going to have to play good as well, coming off a torn ACL against Penn State in the Rose Bowl last year. But it's going to be a tall task for Utah. I'm going to go and pick UCLA to win. I don't think Dante is going to I don't think he's going to make those same mistakes that some other players have made, coming in. And, that's a tough place to play, for sure. I think everyone knows that. And I just don't think it's going to be enough. I don't think I think it's going to be a lower side scoring game. But I think UCLA, I just think they have too many aspects of what surrounds this game going for them. I'm going to go and pick UCLA to win 27-16. I'm going to pick them outright because I'm pretty sure, they are. Utah's favored by 6 points, so I'm going to go and pick 27-16 to UCLA. I think they're going to win outright, and I think the Bruins are going to be able to pop one off early.
Yeah, I'm so torn on this game. I'm so torn on this game because I agree with you where if Cam Rising does play, I'm under the assumption he's not playing this weekend. And even if he does, I agree with you. He's going to have a very good football game for them to win, which makes me wonder, what does Utah do? Do you roll with Johnson? You got the win against Baylor on the road, and you got to face another good team in UCLA, like you said. But, we'll see how this plays out. I think that Dante is gonna, he's solidified himself that he's the man for the Bruins this year, and he's going to be their man moving forward. And I think a lot of people knew that he was going to have a solid season. It's been a lot quicker than I thought that he was going to really get adapted to the college game as a freshman. But I don't know if this game is a night game in Rice Eccles, I'd say Utes easy. Actually, maybe not easy, but I'd say Utes. Even without Rising, even without this, I'd say Utes. But daytime, I mean, it's a 1:30 local time kick. Think about the environment. Like, I don't know, man. I think we're gonna get a good ball game. I think we're gonna get a defensive slugfest in this game. But I think UCLA covers. But I don't think that they get it outright. I like this Utah team. I do. I understand that they've gone through their troubles without Rising, but as you said, I'm under the assumption that Rising is not playing, and I don't know. I think that they're gonna. Utah has enough to where I think that they can outplay UCLA just by a hair. And this game might come down to who really has the last possession of the ball game. It could happen to that, but I'm gonna go with a low-scoring game, but I'm going to go Utah on a last-second field goal. They take the victory over UCLA. Give me 20-19. Utes defeat the Bruins. Last-second field goal. Get the victory at Rice Eccles. Stay undefeated. But like I said, it could come down to whoever has the last possession of that ball game. I'm very torn on it. I think it'll be a good game, but good defensive battle. Looking forward to that game like many others this weekend, but now we got to talk about the team that's got a lot of concerns around them right now, and that's the Tide. And the Tide is not rolling. They're not rolling to start this year. They lost to Texas, obviously at home by 10, and that game could have been a lot uglier than what it was. And then they looked horrific last weekend on the road against USF, who, if they would have had any pulse offensively, would have beaten Alabama. And Alabama's got to turn around, go back to Bryant-Denny, and take on a respectable program with the Ole Miss Rebels. I know you've got a lot on your mind and a lot to talk about with this game, so let's waste no time. I want to get your thoughts. How are we feeling about Ole Miss versus Alabama and Bryant-Denny this weekend?
So, as you talked about Alabama, they went to Southern Florida, which was one thing in itself, and another thing in itself is they looked like absolute garbage, trash. Like, they were horrible. They played Ty Simpson and Tyler Buckner in that game, which neither of them looked good at all. And I think Ty Simpson looked good when he was actually able to throw the ball, but that was, not often. This Alabama team, they're just not elite with the coaching staff, and that is, say what you want about Alabama. The last two coaching cycles that they've had, getting Pete Golding as defensive coordinator and now rolling with, Tommy Rees and what they have, a defensive coordinator who's calling that defense. It doesn't even, we don't know. It sounds like Lane Kiffin knows, but, none of the public knows, which is already one thing in itself. This Alabama team they have issues, and it starts with the coaching staff, and that is something you've really never, if you thought about Alabama football, the team may have not been the best, but their coaching staffs have always been the best of the best, and you can't say that now. They were, they were the number one national seed in 2014. Did they lose to Ohio State in that game? They did in the semifinal, but, with Blake Sims at quarterback, they were still the national number one seed heading into that playoff game. In 2015, Jake Coker's the quarterback, and they still won the national championship. And, Yeah, were those teams really good? Yeah. But when you're talking about, a team that's supposed to be really good around this entire, program, offensively and defensively, talented wise, and, we're talking about a quarterback issue for Alabama in 2014 and 2015. We're talking about a quarterback issue now in 2023, but the offensive line, they don't look good. The defensive, front seven, they're fine. They're not elite. The secondary, it's been tested so far, and you've seen it against Texas. They looked horrible, and against Texas, they didn't even pressure Quinn Ewers. Like, I think they pressured him like 4 times through that entire game. Yeah. This team has issues and bad issues, and issues that are going to cause them to lose games that they just should not be losing. When you flip over to the Ole Miss side, they played an interesting game against Tulane. They had to go on the road to Tulane. They handled it. Did they play a backup quarterback? They did. But they've played 3 games, and they have, I believe, 10 pressures in those 3 games, which or not 10 pressures, 10 sacks.
10 sacks. 10 sacks.
Yes, excuse me. Through 3 games. And that's, if you take it by number-wise, that's about a little bit over 3 a game. They smoked Georgia Tech pretty easily. They ended up covering that game off a late touchdown, but they still covered. They beat Tulane in the second half convincingly. They destroyed Mercer. I mean, that should happen. When I look at this game reminds me of the Texas game a lot through schematically and the overall feel that I get from this game. I don't think Alabama wins this game, and they're favored by 7 against Ole Miss. This game has always been looked at super closely the last 3 years, just because, Alabama has kind of, I wouldn't say fallen off, but they're definitely not, from that 2020 national championship team. They are not even in the same.
Removed. They're far removed.
They are a AAA team compared to an MLB squad.
Yes.
If not AA. This Alabama team has issues, and they're gonna have to figure it out. I think Ole Miss right now they're rolling. They won the Georgia Tech panel. Well, I mean, they played at home, but they rolled. They didn't look bad at all. This offense has been putting up points. I just don't think Alabama is going to have the defense to stop Ole Miss, which is interesting. It's a 3:30 kickoff.
Yeah.
CBS. It's going to be a big game. I'm going to go ahead and pick Ole Miss to win, 30-20. I think they win by 10. There's one thing. The only reason why I think that Alabama puts up 20 is because Pete Golding is the defensive coordinator there. If they were playing any team similar to them with the defense, that isn't headed by the former coordinator at Alabama. Alabama knows what they're going to try to run. I don't think it's going to be enough, which is interesting to say, but I think Ole Miss just goes into Bryant Denny, and I think they're going to be able to take them down convincingly. So I'm going to go ahead and take Ole Miss to win that game.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your statements. A couple words have been floating around a lot recently, and those are the words that have been floating around for a while, but now it might be the case, and that's the dynasty might be over. Nick Saban just does not look like Nick Saban anymore. He doesn't look like the Nick Saban even from 2 years ago when he had Bryce Young as a freshman winning a Heisman Trophy. He doesn't even look like the same Nick Saban that played Texas last year, where he was aggressive. It's Nick Saban. Like, you're basically turning there and you're looking at like God on the opposite sideline because he's the best coach in college football history. And I'm sorry, but sometimes age gets up to you. And Nick Saban's in his 70s, and it looks like age is finally getting to this man. And I think it's getting to not just him, but his entire coaching staff, as you mentioned. I think it's there. I do. I think it's gotten to that entire coaching staff. I just and the thing is that they did not look good against USF. And yes, with Jalen Milroe, that's the biggest thing is who should Alabama play at quarterback? Who should Alabama play at quarterback? It doesn't really matter who they play at quarterback. Yeah, Milroe, with how awful your offensive line is, probably gives you the best shot to win because he's the most mobile guy. But, like, what does it matter? I mean, Milroe was pressured by Texas. Like, they were pressured by Texas. What are they going to do when they face SEC talent up front? Now, don't get me wrong. Texas can go get some talent. Don't get me wrong there. But the SEC, it just means more. The SEC West has been the best conference, the best division in college football. Like, probably since 2000, it's been the best division in college football. And Alabama's going to have to face some good teams up front. And one of those teams that they're going to have to face up front, like you said, very similar to this Texas game, Ole Miss. I mean, it's a team that's got a fierce front. And originally, I thought about this game. I said, Alabama might lose to Texas, but they'll right the ship against USF, and then they'll turn things around against Ole Miss. After seeing the news that Jalen Milroe was benched against USF, I immediately made my decision about this football game. I didn't care what happened against USF. I didn't care if Milroe got the starting job back again like he is in this ball game against Ole Miss. I made up my mind about this football game, and that is that Alabama is in disarray, and they're not going to be able to handle Ole Miss. Like you said, I do think it's going to be a competitive game. But the thing is that last year was a competitive game too. And last year, Alabama wins the ball game because of two individuals against Ole Miss. They won that game 30-24. They went on the road, and they won that game because of two people. And who are those two people? Jahmyr Gibbs and Bryce Young. Who is not on this roster this year? Jahmyr Gibbs and Bryce Young. Those were two guys, as well as a couple defensive plays that stepped up. They don't have that anymore. Alabama doesn't have that. They don't have a defensive identity. They don't have an identity, period. They don't. Their identity right now was to go back to a run-first team, but they've been forced to pass in their past two football games. I mean, that doesn't look like a run-first murder ball style team to me. It looks like a team that's playing because they're playing to try to win. They're not playing not to lose at this point. They're playing the best ball that they can, and that best ball only beats South Florida by 2 touchdowns. How are you going to beat SEC West teams that have talent galore? And one of those teams is Ole Miss this week, and it's early in the season. And Alabama, they had their week to go fix things, and they did not use that week to fix things. So I think Ole Miss is getting this job done. I like 30-20. That's a very nice score to me. But I think the scoreboard will make it a little closer. Similar to what the Texas game did. I think it'll be a very similar game to the Texas game, actually, where it just seems like Ole Miss is dominating this football game. They're dominating up front. They're getting in the backfield. They're pressuring Jalen Milroe. He'll make a couple plays, don't get me wrong, but he'll also make a couple mistakes, and that will ultimately haunt Bama. But I think the scoreboard will show it close, but I think this game will be all Rebels, and they're marching into Bryant-Denny and taking the victory. With this one, I'm going to go 28. Now, I'll go 27-19. I'm going to go Ole Miss walks into Bryant-Denny, beats Alabama, and Alabama might be in a territory of possibly ranked 20th or lower in the nation, as well as in our polls. Moving forward for the rest of the year, there's a lot of concerns for this team. They're going to have to right the ship, and it's only going to get tougher from here because then again, next week they got to go on the road and take Mississippi State. Obviously they didn't look the best against LSU, but that's still a road game against, that's their first real road test this year is against Mississippi State. It's a conference game. It's the first real road conference game. Like, it doesn't get any easier for Bama. It doesn't. And they don't have that Bryce Young that can bail them out, or that Jahmyr Gibbs that can bail them out, or the defense that can bail them out. They're not that team anymore. They're not. And unless we get Nick Saban from 10 years ago back on that sideline, things aren't going to change. Things are not going to change for Alabama. they're looking in a rough spot right now. They are. But to go really from a darker tone, we'll go to a more of a, I guess, a little lighter tone with two teams that are currently looking pretty good offensively this year compared to Alabama. And that's a Big 12 matchup, actually, funny enough, that we've got. The first Big 12 game in the history of Brigham Young University. They traveled to Kansas to take on the Jayhawks. Kansas took care of business last weekend against Illinois. Kansas 9.5-point favorite against BYU. BYU went on the road, beat Arkansas. We thought that game was going to be interesting. We both picked Arkansas. BYU picked it up late in that ball game. But do we think that they can repeat, go to a team in the Midwest that has Kansas in their name, and possibly get an upset?
So we're talking about a classic Big 12 matchup of two teams that are 3-0, BYU and Kansas. How more classic could you get than this? It's a weird game. It's a 3:30 game. It's on ESPN, big ESPN. This is going to have a lot of eyes on it. And what I think we're about to watch is we're about to watch Jalen Daniels be put into the Heisman conversation.
Okay.
He's a very good quarterback. They had a rough game against Nevada last week. They had to go on the road to play that game, by the way. They only won by 7, but I think that, we're talking about it's a long trip. We're talking about a team that is probably excited to play some good, a good BYU team, and I think they're looking ahead a little bit. And I think Kansas, when's the last time we were able to talk about Kansas and said they're looking ahead? I mean, let's get real here. Last year, obviously, they had, a really good year. They made a bowl game and played Arkansas in a really fantastic game. But, I mean, we're talking about a Kansas team that, they're within how the landscape of college football looks. They're in the mix for, everything. I mean, they could make the Big 12 championship game at this point, because who's that second tier? Because right now I think we have Texas and maybe Oklahoma in that first tier, which is the first time we've been able to say that for a while now. And after that, that second tier, right? That second tier, who we looking at? Kansas State, they're in there. Cincinnati, are they in there? No. Texas Tech, maybe. I mean, who knows what they'll look like? Iowa State, no. Oklahoma State, probably not. And those are the teams that Kansas is going to have to play. They're playing a lot of teams that are on level with them. And we're talking about a Kansas team, I think their biggest, worry in this game is that they might be looking ahead again next week, because next week they go on the road and play Texas on ABC at 3:30. And that's obviously a huge game. But we're talking about a BYU team that they're coming off a fresh win at Arkansas by 7 points. And this is going to be, I mean, we're looking at a potentially a really fun game here. It's going to be an offensive battle, I think, with how, this game is going to go. I think it's going to be similar to BYU's fortune last year. They beat Baylor, and then the very next week they had to turn around and go play Oregon. And I think having a team that just comes off a really big win, a really close win on the road, basically for them, that's a far travel. I think, they're gonna have to go to Kansas. And I just think it's too much to ask for a team like BYU to go back-to-back like that and win. I'm going to pick Kansas. I think this game is going to be close. I think it's going to be high-scoring as well. Kansas is 9.5-point favorites. I think that line is probably about right to what I have, because I have 42-30. I think Kansas wins by 12. I think they cover. But I think we're going to look at potentially one of the best games of the season for sure here.
Yeah, I think this game's going to be interesting, too. I think it's going to be a fun football game. And I agree with you. It's an old-fashioned Big 12 football game. We're going to see a lot of offense. BYU showed that last week against Arkansas. Went on the road, took on the victory, as we mentioned. But as you said, they might fall back down to earth this week. Kansas is a good team. I like this team. I liked Kansas a lot last year when they ended up finishing the way that they did. I was a little upset because I liked that team. I did. They beat Oklahoma. They were that close to beating TCU with a backup quarterback. Like, this team is good. Like, they're a good team. Don't get me wrong. Kansas, like you said, they could make a run at possibly winning the Big 12 this year. They could be that TCU team this year that could go and have a miraculous run. They got the schedule to do it. They do. All you got to do is beat Texas and beat Oklahoma, and you're there. Like, you're there. You're on that level of being a TCU. But I like this team. I think this game will be. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be throughout, just because the way you and I both weren't high on BYU this year, but they played solid. They're still sitting 3-0 right now. They haven't had a loss this year, and they had the big win against Arkansas. But I don't know. I like Kansas. I do. I'm not going to lie. I love the Jayhawks. I'm big on this team. I'm high on them this year, and I think that they're going to get this victory. I do think BYU covers. It might be a bit of a backdoor cover, but I do think we do see BYU covered in this ballgame. I'm going to go with a bit of an interesting score here. I'm going to go 48 to 40. I think that BYU does have a cover. But I think Kansas just kind of leads by a touchdown, maybe two scores for a majority of this ball game, and BYU just kind of scores late. But I do have BYU covering, but I think Kansas, I agree with you. I think Kansas is getting the job done. Give me the Jayhawks 48-40 over the Cougars in that one. And speaking of Cougars, we'll talk about another team, the Cougars, and these are, I don't know if you saw it, but circulating today on Twitter, the background of the Pac-2. A lot of officials from both of these schools were meeting today for what's really the remaining two teams in the Pac-12 as it stands for next year, and what might become the Pac-2, and that's the Beavers and the Cougars, Oregon State and Washington State. This is going to be a fun football game. These are two very, very, very fun teams in the Pac-12. Washington State got that big win a couple weeks ago against Wisconsin, got that win under their belt. Oregon State, both you and I, were high on them from the beginning. I have now climbed up. I'm high on the Beavers. They've looked good to start this season. This one, though, we might have just added to the list of Pac-12 of great games happening in the Pac-12 this weekend. Am I right?
Yeah, this is, I think Washington State, in a world of what power rankings look like and power ratings look like, I think they're probably rated. I think, they're probably around a top 25 team. They should definitely be ranked upon ranking-wise. But I think this Washington State team, I'm going to have to see them do it against Oregon State because I think the Wisconsin win was obviously huge for them. But I think we're kind of figuring what Wisconsin is going to be, and I just don't think they're a complete team yet. And I think Oregon State, they have some pretty big wins. San Diego State, they only beat them 26-9. San Diego State is a pretty good team, especially defensively. And they, the most amount of points they've let up is 17 this year, and that was against San Jose State in Week 1 on the road as well. And San Jose State, they have a pretty good, offense for a Mountain West squad. I think Oregon State is too good for them at this point. I think that they'll be able to run the ball well, and as we've talked about in the past with Washington State, they're not the best running team at all. Last week was their first big, big emphatic, running game. I think last week was actually the first time they've clicked over 100 yards. Yeah, they had 103 yards against Colorado State, but last week they had about 160. So I just don't think they're going to run the ball on Oregon State at all. I think they're a tough front to run on, and if you're going to have to make Cam Ward they're going to spy him. Obviously, they're not going to try to let him out of the pocket. They're going to make him throw from the pocket. And I think if you're going to make a team have to be one-sided, I just think it's really hard to win a football game, especially against a good team. I think Oregon State does win this game. I think it is going to be somewhat close just because I think Washington State's defense is going to be able to hold them. But I think Oregon State's going to have pretty good field position for a lot of this game. I'm going to go ahead and pick 30-21 Oregon State covers. They're 3-point favorites on the road. I think it's going to be it's gonna be a fun game to watch because I think this is Oregon State. A lot of people have them high. I would say this is gonna be their first big like. All right, let's see what you can do on the road against a ranked opponent. Conference play as well. So I think we're gonna figure out a lot about what DJ this offense looks like against Pac-12 competition.
Yeah, I agree with you. Oregon State has caught my eye. They've looked good in their first 3 weeks of matchups. They've taken on two very respectable Mountain West opponents in San Jose State and San Diego State. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, were both of those on the road, actually? I think they might have both been. Can't remember if they were on the road or not last week. Oh, no, they were home. They hosted San Diego State.
Yeah.
But they San Jose they were on the road against. But this is a big road test for them. And they've got a gauntlet of a schedule this year. Do the Beavers of a Pac-12. They don't have to face USC, but they have to face basically everybody else. Next week they got Utah on Friday at home, which will be a fun game as well. They got to host UCLA in the beginning of October. They got to travel to Colorado to start off November. They do host Washington late in the season, and then they got to travel to Oregon to wrap up the season on the Friday night before, or on Black Friday actually, is that when that ball game will be. It's scheduled to be on Fox 8:30 kick, but I like Oregon State. I do, and I like Washington State too. I like that offense. I'm not gonna lie, but I agree with you where it just seems like Oregon State is better. Oregon State is a better team right now. They give me that feel. They give me that vibe. I like this team. I think that this team is very similar to a lot of those front runners in the Pac. I think the Pac-12 right now has really it has two top tiers. I'll say this: it has two top tiers. That tip top tier right now for me are four teams currently sit there: USC, Washington, Oregon, and Oregon State. Those, I think, are the four teams right now that realistically have a chance to win the conference right now. Then you've got really that second tier, and you've got the team that's kind of floating in between them, which is Utah for me. I think they're between the first and the second tier. But when you look at that main second tier, it's arguably the Utah float. You've got UCLA, you've got Washington State there, and I think you could argue Colorado in that statement as well. Could make an argument for there, and then you've got everybody else who's just kind of sitting there, and even Arizona could make a little chip at possibly being in that mid tier. But I think that Oregon State they're just better. They're a step above Washington State, and I think that they will show that. I think that they'll go into Pullman and they'll get a victory and a tight ball game. I think it'll be close, but I do think they cover. I'm gonna go 34. I'm going to go 34-24, 10-point game. Oregon State takes the victory over Washington State. 34-24, give me the Beavers in that one to take the victory, remain undefeated, and move forward into a Friday game against Utah in Week 5. But speaking of Utah, let's talk about a team that they faced in Week 2, and that's the Baylor Bears, who are hosting the Texas Longhorns. Texas right now, I mean, the way that it's shaping up, folks, they're back. The Longhorns look to be back right now. They look to be, once again, a great thing for college football. But Texas looks to be a team to make some noise in college football this year and possibly make a push for the college football playoff. This week, they are on the road against Baylor. Baylor finally got their first win of the season against LIU. They looked competitive against Utah. Granted, Utah struggled to get anything going offensively in that game, but Baylor, the biggest issue has been the offense this year, but do we think that they can get the job done against Texas?
So we're coming with the Texas team that just escaped Wyoming last week after their huge win. They won that game 31-10, but I believe it was like 10-10 in the fourth quarter or something like that. It was close.
Going into the fourth, it was 10-10. Yeah. That's right.
So I think this is last week was just survive and win for Texas. I think everyone knows that, unless if you just you're looking straight at the box score. But I think Texas, they did what they had to do last week. And let's not forget, Wyoming did beat Texas Tech. They're 2-1. It's not a Wyoming team to just put aside. I mean, they've already beaten a Big 12 team, and, they tried to do it again. It's just, Texas Tech and Texas this year are a little bit two different feelings. So we're going to look at a Texas team that's probably going to be playing their first game back to full confidence. They're focused. They're locked on. And they have to go on the road and play a Baylor team, which Baylor's given them problems in the past with their physicality. But I think Texas is at a point where they feel good about their physicality. They showed it against Alabama. They dominated both sides of the ball for the most part. They handled Alabama pretty well. And, Baylor, they're going to have to roll with, a quarterback that they probably don't want to really roll with. And, Sawyer Robinson, I don't know if he got benched, but I know RJ Martinez, who was their backup, got a little bit of playing time against LIU. But Sawyer went 10 for 22, 113 yards and a touchdown against LIU, which LIU is not that great of a, they're not that good of a program in FCS. But Baylor isn't going to be able to run the ball, and if Texas does for any reason have issues against that, I think this game could be close. But I don't think Baylor is going to be able to run the ball better than Alabama. At least I would hope not. Based off just overall talent they have there. So Texas is a 15-point favorite on the road. It's a 7:30 game, so it's going to be, it's going to be pretty packed in Waco. But I think Texas is going to win this game. I think they win 37-17. I think they cover 15 points. I think they're going to be back, and I think they're going to be pretty focused. They're going to be locked in. I think Texas is going to take this one, and I think we're going to have a 4-0 Texas team for rolling into Kansas, and then after that, it's they know who they have. Yeah, so
yeah,
it's
Red River time.
It's gonna be a fun few weeks here for Texas. They'll I'm sure we'll be talking about them for the next 2 weeks for sure. So I don't know. I think this Longhorn team is I think they're back. So, but who knows how many times we've said that?
Yeah, that is true. Who knows how many times we've said that? And I mean, this was my Big 12 championship game. When we went to our preseason predictions, obviously one of these teams I'm looking pretty good on. The team that I picked to win the Big 12, I'm looking pretty good on. But the team that I picked to finish first in the regular season, I'm not looking too good on, and that's Baylor. If Blake Shapen plays this game, I think it's a different game. But obviously he's out still this week, so they're gonna go with Sawyer Robinson. And I mean, we both watched that Utah game together, and we were not impressed by him in that ball game. And Texas is a very similar defense to what Utah. I mean, both of them have been solid defenses to start this year. Granted, Texas hasn't been really known to have that solid defense since really the Mac Brown days, but still, they've shaped themselves up to be a very balanced unit this year. And I understand, yeah, they're going on the road. They're taking on Baylor. It's their first conference game of the year, but I initially thought that Baylor might have a chance in this game. But the more I think about this game, the more I'm like, yeah, dude, Texas should just win this game pretty handily. And I think handily enough to where they just I'm gonna go a little closer, but still cover for Texas. I think that offense is just going to be too overpowering for Baylor. I think that that's just going to be the deciding factor of this ball game, is that Texas just has too many weapons for Baylor to compete with. And I'm going to go I'm thinking of a score here that kind of fits in that realms. I'm going to go 41-24. Texas still covers in the ball game. They still cover that 15-point spread. But not by too much. They do still cover. I think that they control a majority of this ball game, but I'm going to go 51-24. Give me the Longhorns over Baylor in that ball game. That's the Saturday night football game on ABC, but a lot of the country's eyes are going to be tuned in on NBC, and I know at least my eyes will be in. Your eyes might not be in, but your ears might be on this game, and this is it, folks. This is the biggest game in the country this weekend. Tyler and I, both being guys from Central Ohio, we know what this game means, and we know what this game is going to be. It's the Buckeyes and it's the Fighting Irish. Ohio State, Notre Dame, a lot of people have a lot of opinions on this football game, including myself and yourself. And we have a lot of differing opinions on this ball game to spoil a little bit here, but I'll let you talk first. I'll let you talk first about what you're thinking about this game, and then I will give my breakdown. But I'll let you take center stage and talk about Buckeyes fighting Irish, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Let's have it.
So this game is obviously huge. You know, I work a normal, I work a third shift job, and I have Notre Dame fans on my shift. I have Ohio State fans on my shift. I'm a fellow Ohio State fan, and Notre Dame, Ohio State. I guess it's technically not a rivalry that people know, but whenever we play, things get turned up to a high notch. It's just, I guess it's a region thing where whenever we play, we do not like each other a lot, and I think this game it'll be I think it'll be the closest Ohio State Notre Dame game that we've had. I guess last year was close, but it felt like as soon as Ohio State got the lead, they weren't going to give it up, and that's essentially what happened. It took a while to get that lead, but they did, and they didn't let it up. So when we're breaking this game down, obviously we have to look at Ohio State. They are not the same team as they were last year. Not even close schematically. I know the last few weeks they've kind of opened the offense up to get more spread, air raid, more concepts like that that they were running, with the CJ Stroud era. But this defense is pretty physical. And I think this is probably the best matchup for Ohio State against Notre Dame based off, stylistically how they're going to play and what they've been prepared to run through the entire offseason and, training camp and everything like that. And when it comes down to this game, I think the biggest thing is third down for both sides. Notre Dame offensively and defensively is a better third down team, and it's gonna come into play is Ohio State gonna have to play different than they've played all year on third down and be more one-sided, or are they gonna be able to get to 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 and be able to convert those, or are they gonna be held on 1st and 2nd down? They're in 3rd and 5, 3rd and 3rd and 6, anything longer than that. Once you hit basically 3rd and 6, that's basically you're gonna be passing the ball unless if you're in field goal territory where you're gonna go for it. I think with how this game is gonna play out, we have, if we're going to go behind the curtain, we have bets on how this game is, how it's going to go. And I'm not going to explain how those bets, what those bets are, but we have bets because I think we are on the different table. Like we're in two different rooms when it comes to how this game is going to go. And
yes,
as an Ohio State fan, I think Notre Dame is going to win this game. I have my doubts of what the front seven is going to be able to do to this Notre Dame front. Notre Dame has every team they've played outside of, I guess, NC State. Before the rain delay, NC State was getting the better hand of Notre Dame, but once they hit halftime, or I guess not halftime, but once they came out, they basically dominated NC State up front. They got a lot of pass rush, and their offensive line looked a lot better. Which I guess if you take that into account of how this Ohio State game could be, that was kind of their halftime break. And we've seen Ohio State, they looked really good in the first half. Noticeably against Michigan is how I take it. Though they, last year against Michigan, they bullied them up front that first half, and then the second half came, and it's like a different different switch kind of just flipped. It was really odd. And I think Notre Dame, I just think that they're going to be able to get pressure on Ohio State with this offensive line if they're going to have to open up the passing game. And I don't think that the interior for Ohio State is going to be able to withstand pass rush coming from the inside. And I think that, Kyle McCord, it's his first big road game. I guess Indiana, you could say, because it's technically his first start, but Indiana, Notre Dame, they might be from the same state, but they are different beasts.
Two very different.
So I think Notre Dame, this game reminds me of, I guess, the CJ Stroud game against Oregon, where it's his first road test, essentially, of the season, and it showed. He did not look great against that Oregon team, and they got better throughout the year. and then they lost to Michigan, and it's like a stylistic matchup. And I think Ohio State is trying to, Ohio State, the way they've been, they want to win the national championship. Michigan, if they lose, it's a stylistic thing. I think now what we're seeing is Ohio State they're getting prepared to beat teams like this, like Notre Dame, like Michigan. But I think it's like Alabama. I don't think they need to do that because, yes, losing to Michigan as an Ohio State fan hurts. But, I mean, did you see how close we were to being almost national champions? Because I think it's consensus that if we would have beaten Georgia,
whoever won
if a field goal went differently, I think that was the winner of the national championship.
Yeah.
And I think that Ohio State, I just don't think that up front they have the talent to beat, a team like this, because we've seen with Ohio State, their weaknesses always relied on their front set, or not, I guess not in their front seven, but their pass rush and being able to protect the quarterback. And even with, DeJuan Jones, Paris Johnson Jr., there were still times last year when pass pro was an issue. And running the ball, I don't think we've ever been able to do against an elite defense, like at a high level. And I just don't think it's a good recipe to beat Notre Dame. And I hope I'm wrong, because as a fan, I would love to see us beat Notre Dame. But as I guess an analyst, or as someone who's trying to see it from both sides, I don't think this Notre Dame team is. I don't think they're going to lose to Ohio State, and I have Notre Dame. It's a very close game. They're 3-point dogs at home, but I have them winning 26-24. I think Notre Dame wins this game outright. I don't know. Hopefully, it's a classic game. Because if you lose a classic game like Georgia, that game was heartbreaking. But I don't know. It just lets you know that they're there, and I think losing a heartbreaking game now compared to Georgia would feel a lot better, because it's like at least we know we're a really good football team, rather than our season ended with us playing the best game of the year, which you never want that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you said, it seems like we're in two different rooms about this game, and I keep struggling between the fan and the college football the college football person in me, because the fan in me, being an Ohio State fan, says Ohio State, there's too much talent there. I get it. Notre Dame's a respectable club. Don't get me wrong. I think Notre Dame's solid. If you asked me after week one, I thought Ohio State was going to lose to Notre Dame. Personally, I did. I did not think Ohio State looked good in week one. I didn't, and I will stick by that. It didn't look good in week one, but the more this team, now I understand that they've played Western Kentucky and they played Youngstown State in the weeks following, but they've opened up the playbook more. And Ryan Day has said, he is on record saying this, that they're going to throw everything they can at Notre Dame offensively. Now, he said this multiple times against other teams and hasn't done it, but he said this against some teams and has done it. He did it against Georgia. He did it but he hasn't done it against Michigan. What are we going to get here from Ryan Day? And that's what has me worried the most about this game. But the confidence in me, the way that I see this, I think the talent is going to bail out Ohio State, because here's the big thing for me. What I think determines this ball game, whether it go either way, is turnovers. Because if Kyle McCord can go play a clean game, or have one turnover that isn't capitalized on, I think Ohio State wins this game. And that's where Notre Dame, on the other hand, they got Sam Hartman. Don't get me wrong. Sam Hartman's a good quarterback. He's a good quarterback. They got one of the best power running backs in the game, and Audric Estime. They're good. They're good up front. Don't get me wrong, they are. I mean, I think I read something where Joe Alt, their left tackle, has not allowed a single pressure all year in their first games of the season. That's impressive. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't care who you got in the schedule. That's good. And I think the matchup that he'll be getting most is JT Tuimoloau. JT Tuimoloau has not looked good this year for Ohio State. He's looked very slow. It's funny enough, it's actually a little bit of a reversal of the roles from last year, where Jack Sawyer has stepped up a bit more. He looked good in that Western Kentucky game, and Tuimoloau has looked quiet. Now, I don't know if that's just because he's gotten off to a slow start and things aren't clicking yet, but if Ryan Day coaches this football game like he coached against Georgia. Because to be completely honest with you, that's the best I've ever seen. That's the potential that I see in Ryan Day as a coach. That's what Ryan Day should be as a coach every single week. I don't care who you're playing. I don't care if you're playing Purdue. I don't care if you're playing the Akron School for the Blind. I do not care. That's how you need to be coaching every single weekend. And he hasn't done that. Look at the Michigan game past 2 years. He's been outcoached by Jim Harbaugh's staff. He's been outcoached in those games. And Ryan Day is supposed to be one of the best offensive masterminds in all of college football. Don't get me wrong, he's got teams that have put up great points, but the one time I ever saw this man's potential, I've only ever seen it. I've seen it actually 2 times. 2 times in my life, I've seen the full potential of Ryan Day. It was the Clemson Sugar Bowl game in 2020, and it was last year's Peach Bowl game against Georgia. Only 2 times I've ever seen it in my life. I don't care what other game you talk about, that's been it. I would like to think that even if Ryan Day just has 85% of that, I'd like to think Ohio State beats Notre Dame. Part of me thinks this is going to be a close game, but the behind the scenes stuff of what I've been saying has me thinking that this is not going to be a close game. And the thing that I come back to is last year's ball game. And I understand that game is going to be very different. It might play out somewhat similar to where score-wise, but it might be closer in a sense. Oh, that game last year, Ohio State won that game 24-10. Or was it 21-10? It was something to 10, 20-something to 10. Ohio State won. They looked out front with a couple big plays in the ball game. They ended up beating Notre Dame mainly with a third quarter surge. The big thing about this game, and the big thing that I've said behind closed doors is that, and I'll say this with the doors open, I don't see Notre Dame having success offensively. And I get it, they've got that front. Don't get me wrong. That front's they're going to run the ball. They're going to try to run the football. And it gets me a little concerned that Ohio State, looking at what they've done, they're allowing, 3 yards per carry. They're allowing something like, there's holes there on the offensive line. They haven't had a lot of stuffs. And that's a little concerning. Don't get me wrong. That's a little concerning. But I think Ohio State shuts down one facet of Notre Dame's offense. I don't know if it's the pass game, and I understand that the pass rush is going to be tough to get there, but I think Jim Knowles has finally figured out his personnel on this defense. And I think he's going to show that he's figured out the personnel on this defense. And I don't think that that'll be a question in this ballgame. Ohio State, I believe it was looking at overall PFF grades, I think they're the best team in the country right now defensively. Yeah, they played Indiana. Yeah, they played, Youngstown State and Western Kentucky, but Notre Dame's still Notre Dame. They don't have that Michael Mayer, X factor anymore. They don't have that. And that to me is where I think talent wins out in this ballgame. I think that talent takes Ohio State in this ballgame. And I've stuck to a certain score this entire week, and I'm going to stick to that score in this ballgame. I think that Kyle McCord, he didn't look comfortable against Indiana. He's looked pretty comfortable the past 2 weeks, but the one guy, and I'll say this, there's one guy in my mind who I think pulls out this game for Ohio State, and it's one guy that had a fantastic game last weekend, and that's Mr. TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson in this game is what I think wins Ohio State this football game, because if you can get this kid in the open field, nobody's catching him. It's not going to happen. And I think Ohio State, I think Ryan Day will figure that out and will try to get some plays with him on the outside, whether it's a swing pass, whether it's a wheel route, whether it's running sweeps on the outside. If Ohio State can get TreVeyon Henderson in the open field, they're going to beat Notre Dame. And I think that they're going to do that in this ballgame. I think that they're going to connect with their guys in Marvin Harrison. I think Igbuka is going to be a factor. I think Cade Stover is going to be a factor. But I think that Ohio State, you said it's very similar to the Oregon game. I think this is different. Oregon game was week 2. Ohio State had one game to get C.J. Stroud comfortable. One game. They had one game to get him comfortable, and that was against Minnesota. People could have seen Oregon coming into Columbus and beating that game. This time they've got a little bit. They've had this game circled for a reason. Ryan Day has, as I would hope that Ryan Day has been focused on this game since fall camp began, because you focus on this game and you can go from there. That's the big game. A lot of people are saying Ohio State's not winning this game. I think they are. I think the talent wins out. I think that you just see something from Ohio State that just makes you sit there at the end of the ball game and say, they're just better than Notre Dame. They're just a better football team than Notre Dame. I've got this game very similar to last year, but I've got it a little wider, funny enough. I've got this game. I think Notre Dame only scores one offensive touchdown in this football game. And I think they scored less than 13 in this game. I'm going to go 27-9. Ohio State takes the victory over Notre Dame. And I understand that might be the fan in me talking about this, but what I've seen the past 2 weeks tells me that this Ohio State team is a very well-rounded football team. Probably the most well-rounded Ohio State team that I have seen since the days of J.T. Barrett. And I keep comparing this team to 2016. Obviously, that team didn't go win a national championship, but they took care of business. I see this game more as that Oklahoma game. Not in the fact of how that game will play out, but in the fact of what that game means. It's a road game. It's in a deeper part of your out-of-conference schedule. You're not jumping right into it like the Oregon game. You're taking some time in that ball game. And that's what I think is the difference in this, is that Ohio State has had time to get Kyle McCord ready. And he's looked fine. That's all he needs to do, is he needs to look fine. And I think he'll look fine. I do think he does have maybe a turnover. I think he has a mistake in the ball game, but I don't think it comes back to bite Ohio State. I think the defense clamps down, and I think that Ohio State walks into South Bend and takes the victory 27-9 over Notre Dame. I'm making that call. Like you said, we're in two separate rooms. I could see it going either way, but I'm going to go with the way that I as an Ohio State, as a man who's grown up watching Ohio State, and as a man that sees the talent on this football team, I'm going with that. It might be wrong. It might be completely wrong. But, that's what I'm going with. 27-9, Buckeyes take the victory. That's one of those top teams in the Big Ten East. And there's another team in the Big Ten East that's looked pretty solid to start this year. And it's not the one that's the back-to-back champions. No, it's the one that people think is the upstart this year. It's the Penn State Nittany Lions. Week 1 at home, didn't look too great in the first half, but got the job done, took the victory over West Virginia. Since then have faced, some okay-ish opponents. They had Illinois on the road last week. Didn't look the best in that first half, but pulled out the victory nonetheless. This week they've got Iowa. Iowa, we know what the team is. It's defense. It's defense. It's defense. This is the whiteout game for Penn State. This is the atmosphere that everybody loves for college football. Do we think Iowa has a chance in the whiteout?
I actually think this game is going to be a lot closer than what people think. I think, you got Penn State, who they're extremely good, and they're going to be playing at home. They're 14.5-point favorites. I think everyone's expecting Penn State to win this game. My biggest issue with this team is that stylistically, they are a third and fourth down team. They are one of the, they're top 30 in third and fourth down success, according to analytics. They are 80th in the country on first and second down percentage plays, which, if you're going to give Iowa the ability to play a freshman quarterback, well, I guess sophomore technically, but, it's his first year starting. He did get quite a bit of playing time in last year. But if you're going to give Iowa the ability to get a first-year full-time starter to third down, I think they're going to get some mistakes from Drew Aller, and I love Drew Aller, and you know this. He was my number one quarterback coming out of that recruiting class. I think that Iowa's going to be able to get at least a turnover or two. Whether they convert on it, who knows, because this offense is it's an Iowa offense, which is not a great thing. But Penn State defensively, they're going to be good. They are one of the best first and second down teams, so it kind of goes back the other way. Is Iowa going to be able to convert on third down? Well, Iowa is 113th in the nation on third and fourth down success, which is not good. But I think that coming with a turnover or maybe a pick six or a scoop and score I think they probably will get. I think this game is going to be closer. I think Penn State is going to be the better team. I think you'll be able to tell that, but I think the game is going to be closer just because it's going to be ugly. I have Penn State winning 23-16, which would mean Iowa covers, but I think Penn State, this is their first, I guess they did have West Virginia, but Iowa's it's conference. They play. Iowa Penn State always seems to be a really good game, and it's always usually low scoring as well. It's closer. It's ugly. I think that's what we're gonna get. I think we're gonna get a repeat of another Penn State win. But I think I think they're gonna look. They're gonna come out of this game looking not too bad.
Yeah, I agree with this one. I think that I do think that Drew Aller does have a mistake in this ball game. I do think the atmosphere does something to really limit Iowa in this ball game. Obviously, the offense is it's Iowa, but the defense is also Iowa. They're a stout unit. They're probably either at the end of the year they'll probably end up being a top 3, maybe top defense in the Big Ten. But that'll be seen. I don't know. We got a lot of good defenses in the Big Ten this year. I mean, Ohio State stepped it back up and has a solid defensive unit. Penn State obviously has a good unit. Michigan's got a good unit. Wisconsin. But I was still there. I was still Iowa. And they're going to be that team. But I think that this one is a bit I don't see. Sometimes I don't know how to think about this one because it is only 20 or 14 and a half points. Penn State is favored, but it is the whiteout. But I think that Drew Aller doesn't look the best, but I think that Penn State does get things rolling. I think this game is going to be similar to that first half against Illinois, just throughout the entire ball game. But I have a slight cover by Iowa in this one, just a slight one. I think that Iowa covers. I think Penn State takes care of business, but the slight cover goes 20-6. I think that Penn State beats Iowa. Iowa gets 2 field goals. I don't think that they score a touchdown in this one, but I do think that they do a good job of limiting Drew Aller all night, but I think that just a couple big plays, whether it be from Singleton or Katron Allen or Lambert Smith, whoever it may be, Penn State will get a big play, and that will really be the deciding factor in this ballgame, is they'll be able to get those big plays, and Iowa won't on offense, and I think that's what carries Penn State over Iowa in the whiteout. I'm going to go 20-6. Give me the Nittany Lions in this one. Penn State takes the victory over Iowa. And now to the final 2 really nightcap games. This has been our most in-depth preview that we've gone over, but team that's, after last week, really, what else to say about Missouri? They looked in front for a majority of the ball game against Kansas State, won on a 61-yard field goal, the longest kick in SEC history. That game was electric, and the Tigers came out with a victory. But a lot of people have the team that they're facing this week at home as the best group of 5 team right now, and that's the Memphis Tigers. Memphis, only 6-point dogs in this game. Could we see an upset happen after Missouri rides the highs of upsetting Kansas State?
So when you're talking about Missouri, we're talking about a team that just came off one of their biggest wins in recent history. They're just going to be in the mode to get out of this game, win this game, look ahead. And when you come to that, you have a really good Memphis team who's pretty good defensively, which is going to be an interesting thing to look at. I think I think Missouri does win this game. But I think this game is going to be low scoring. I think it's going to be really tight, actually. I think this game is going to get decided in the fourth quarter. I don't know. It's going to be a close game. The biggest thing that Missouri is going to have to capitalize on is first and second down. They're one of the best teams in the country. They're top 20 in first and second down percentage plays. So I think I have it 24-18. Missouri takes this game. I think this game is going to be close, and I think this is going to be one to watch out for sure.
Yeah, so you've got the push in this one, with Missouri being 6.5-point favorites. It's our first pick for a push this year, in this one. But I kind of like that score. I think it'll be a little low scoring. I think we'll see a little bit more offense in this game. It'll be a battle. Don't get me wrong. I think that this game will be a battle between these two teams. I'm not as high on Missouri as you are, but obviously they beat Kansas State, and Kansas State's the reigning Big 12 champion. That's returning a lot of talent from that roster last year. But I do think that Missouri, I don't think they underestimate Memphis. I just think Memphis is a good, solid team. I have it a little closer, though. I have it 27-25. I'm going to go Missouri in this ballgame. A little bit of an awkward score, but 27-25. Missouri takes the victory over Memphis in this ballgame. Back-to-back home wins. Back-to-back bigger home wins probably when you look at it at the end of the season for the Tigers, which puts them in a good position heading into conference play for Missouri. But speaking of conference play, we finally got to the end of our 12-game slate, and this one are two teams that we both now have in our top 25 toward the bottom, and that's Kansas State and UCF. The Golden Knights have looked like really the best team out of the new additions to the Big 12. They look like the best team this year. But Kansas State, after a loss last week, does it pile on this week for the Wildcats?
No, I think Kansas State gets back to business. I think Kansas State is a really good team. I just think they got I think they just got the short end of the stick of how that game, how that game played out. I mean, they lost on a 61-yard field goal in college. I mean, in the NFL, I guess that's becoming more common, these days. But, in college, not a lot of kickers can, just go out there and trot out for a 61-yard field goal. But I think they'll be fine. The biggest thing to watch out for is Kansas State offensively. They are obviously they're going to want to pass the ball, and UCF is 11th in EPA per pass defensively. They're 11th in the nation, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, this UCF team is under Gus Malzahn. He knows how to win a big game. He's not scared of big games at all. This is a really good offensive versus defensive matchup. Who's going to come out ahead? I think Kansas State does. I just think I want to take Chris Kleiman and that entire staff. I think they're going to bounce back. I think they're not going to fall. I don't think they're going to fall here. I think it's kind of like my upset pick that we're going to get into next. But I think it's more of I wouldn't say wounded animal mode here. But I think Kansas State knows that this is one that they need to win, and especially the kickoff conference play for them. I think it's going to be too big of a game. I think they're going to win this game. I think 28-20 is what I have it at. I think this is going to be a one-possession game, but I think Kansas State is going to be able to take this one out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they bounce back. I think that as of now, we talked about those the two top tiers really in the Big 12, where we talked about how Oklahoma and Texas really kind of look like the top tier, and then Kansas State kind of, maybe Texas Tech look like they could be in that second tier, as well as a couple other teams, one of those teams including UCF. But I think the Kansas State is the top team in that second tier in the Big 12. Obviously Big 12 champions last year. Will Howard, he's back. He played a solid bit last year. I thought they were going to beat Mizzou. They didn't take care of business against Mizzou, but it happens. When you lose off of that, sometimes you just got to shrug your shoulders and say, it didn't bounce our way, and it didn't bounce their way. But I think that this week it does bounce their way. I think that they get the victory. I think it's a very similar score to what you have. I think a little bit more offense in this game from Kansas State. I'm going to go 34-28. I think Kansas State wins and covers in this ball game. I think the Wildcats get the job done. I think they get conference play started off strong, and I think that they can carry some momentum heading into what would be a tougher, really Big 12 conference play. I mean, after this, they do have to take on Oklahoma State on the road. Oklahoma State obviously has not looked like the best team in the Big 12, but then they got Texas Tech on the road, and obviously they got that ball game at Texas Circle. That'll be their biggest test moving on later in the season, but that finally gets us through the 12-game slate that we've got. Went really in-depth with that analysis, but we'll wrap up today's show with our, once again, upset pick of the week. Neither of us have got one correct so far. I will say, not to toot my own horn here, mine have looked a little closer than yours have so far to start the year. I think every single upset pick that I've had, the difference in every single game has only been one score, because it was the Illinois-Toledo game, which was one score. The week after that, I went I think I went with Sam Houston over Air Force, and I think that game ended like 10-3 or something like that. And then last week I went San Jose over Toledo, and that was also a one-score game. But unfortunately hasn't been for the upset. This week, though, you have a little background with this one, but you have an interesting upset pick. What is that upset pick this week?
So we're gonna go to the SEC here, and I'm gonna actually pick Arkansas to beat LSU. As I mentioned in my Kansas State UCF preview, it's kind of a wounded animal mode. I think Arkansas they need this game kind of. They didn't lose in a conference game, but you don't really want to lose in right before heading into conference week. And I think that we're getting an LSU team that. They looked really good against Mississippi State, but I think they might be looking ahead because they go on the road to play Ole Miss next week, which is big for them. And I think that LSU, they might be feeling really good after the Mississippi State win, but I think a lot of people were kind of leaving that game thinking Mississippi State is a bad team, which I don't think is correct. I think Mississippi State is going to be a top 40-ish team in the nation. They might just look bad because of who they're playing, and I think that's kind of the case what they've been the last few years. I think Mississippi State has been a better team than maybe what their record shows, but I think that LSU might be feeling really good, and I think Arkansas, they know they need to kind of win this game to start off their conference play. They're 17.5-point favorites according to CBS, which is what I'm looking at right now. It's a 7 o'clock ESPN game, and I don't know. I'm going to take the Hogs and KJ Jefferson to come out of there and get a win.
So you're taking a bigger upset this week than I'm taking. There's a lot of even the games that we didn't cover. There's still a lot of good games on the docket this weekend. I thought about San Diego State. I thought about San Jose State again, but I'm trying to not go back to back here. I thought about Vandy. I thought about keeping it in the SEC there. I thought about Vandy over Kentucky, but the one that I keep turning back to, the one that I keep feeling the most confident about, is a very interesting one. This is only, for most of the games that I said, you're going with the big upset. Most of the ones that I could really find that I could possibly pick for an upset were about touchdown dogs. And that's what I limited myself at. I said, okay, it's got to be at least 6. Because I thought about Georgia Tech over Wake, but that's only, I believe, a 4.5 spread. So I thought about 6. I said 6 is fine. I'm going to take a 6.5-point dog. I think that's fine. That's still a touchdown. And the 6-point dog that I have this week is the team that's flying high right now after winning the Backyard Brawl on ABC last weekend, and that's the Mountaineers, West Virginia, in the ball game. West Virginia took care of business. They took care of Pitt in that one, and they're facing a Texas Tech team that's a little down on their luck right now. They started 0-2, not the start that they wanted. They're now starting conference play. Can they bounce back is the big question for this team. This game is in Morgantown, which, great atmosphere last weekend. Obviously, probably won't be the same atmosphere, but still, this is going to be a good ball game. Don't get me wrong. This will be a good ball game. One of a lot this weekend that'll be good games, but I'm going Mountaineers over Red Raiders. West Virginia beats Texas Tech. That's my upset pick of the week, and that will wrap up today's show. A very stacked show for a very stacked week. Week 4, folks. It's almost time. Tyler and I have ran down our top 12 games. We've gave you our upset pick. We recapped a little bit of last week with our new top 25s. Talked about some new teams. But that'll be it for this episode. Make sure to follow along on the Orbit Football Podcast on YouTube as well as our Spotify. Follow us on our socials at Twitter and Instagram. We'll be posting there pretty often. We usually do reels on our Instagram and a little bit of videos somewhere on our Twitter, recapping some of these videos. So make sure to tune in there and follow us on our socials. But that'll be all for Tyler. This is Cade signing off once again. You've been listening to the Orbit Football Podcast.